there is a question that cuts deeper than most people are comfortable answering. One that rarely sees the light of day because acknowledging it means facing something quietly eroding mental strength. How often does concentration slip away, almost without warning, as if someone reached inside the mind and tugged the focus towards something trivial? It happens so subtly that it feels as though the will to stay present has been rewired. The intention might be noble, sitting down to accomplish meaningful work, to push forward with a personal mission, to piece together the vision of a better future. But somewhere between the spark of motivation and the final goal, the grip on attention loosens. Suddenly, the mind has wandered into corridors it never intended to enter. The smallest disturbance, a soft chime from a device, a brief notification lighting up a corner of the screen, pulls attention like a hook in water. What begins as a quick glance turns into a slow, steady drift. A scroll through an endless feed, a chain of short videos that dissolve minutes into nothing. The deceptive sense that there is still plenty of time left. Yet, those minutes keep stacking until hours vanish without a trace. The work remains untouched, the vision suspended midair. The troubling part is not just the passage of time. It is what lurks beneath, the quiet machinery of distraction that has been built over years, shaping the way the brain seeks stimulation. Behind each impulsive click and swipe lies an architecture designed to keep human attention fragmented. It is not purely about an absence of discipline. Many modern habits were never consciously chosen. They emerged from repeated exposure to systems that exploit primal impulses. Instant gratification, once an occasional indulgence, has become the default mode of operation. The reward circuits of the brain are constantly primed, ready to chase the next flicker of novelty, the next image, the next surge of quick satisfaction. Among the most powerful of these triggers is the flood of hypersexualized imagery saturating digital spaces, content engineered to tap into the deepest and most automatic drives. It doesn't ask for permission. It simply appears, embedding itself in the mental landscape and competing for dominance over long-term aspirations. This constant collision between present goals and immediate temptation is not a small skirmish. It is a war fought quietly inside every distracted moment. The cost is not measured only in hours lost. It is measured in the weakening of the ability to sustain thought, to endure periods of effort without seeking escape, to live with purpose rather than reacting to whatever appears next on the glowing screen. When these interruptions compound day after day, the mental endurance required to build something meaningful begins to erode. In the background of every story about lost focus lies the recognition that once the mind was sharper. There was a time when deep work flowed uninterrupted for hours, when creative energy surged without the constant itch to check for updates or alerts. The memory of that mental clarity makes the current state feel all the more frustrating. It is as if an internal compass, once steady, now spins unpredictably. And yet, the systems that dismantled that clarity are subtle enough to convince people they are still in control. This pattern plays out in countless ways. Imagine the unfolding of a single day where focus is promised to an important task. The morning begins with determination. Coffee brewed, workspace prepared, distractions supposedly kept at bay. But then, a small pull. A quick check of messages. One leads to another. A short clip sparks curiosity, leading to an article, then to another video. The mind leaps from thought to thought, each new thing displacing the previous goal. By the time attention returns to the original purpose, the momentum has been lost. The sharp edge of motivation has dulled, and the cycle repeats again and again. There is a layer to this struggle that is harder to speak about openly. Beneath the surface distractions lies content that does not simply entertain, it rewires. The saturation of sexualized media, whether explicit or suggestive, imprints itself in a way that subtly shifts the brain's default state. It narrows attention toward short bursts of intense stimulus, making quieter, slower forms of focus feel dull by comparison. This is not a question of morality as much as it is a question of control. Over time, such exposure trains the mind to seek quick, high-intensity hits of pleasure, leaving it restless when faced with tasks that require patience. The force of this conditioning is powerful enough to sabotage even the most critical moments. It can strike when the stakes are highest, when an opportunity demands complete focus. One can envision a scenario where months of preparation culminate in a single decisive moment. Yet the ability to stay fully present is compromised. The mind, conditioned to drift, struggles to resist the pull of old habits. Even a fleeting mental detour can plant seeds of doubt, which then grow into hesitation, which in turn chips away at confidence. Such was the reality in a certain high-pressure situation that had the potential to alter the trajectory of a life's work. The chance had come to stand before those with the resources to turn a vision into reality, to present an idea refined over weeks of careful thought. Every detail had been studied, every word rehearsed until it could be recited without hesitation. The plan was airtight, the confidence solid, until distraction crept in during the days leading up to it. Instead of preserving energy for the moment that mattered, scattered focus seeped in through cracks left open by habitual distractions. Hours that could have been spent sharpening delivery or refining strategy dissolved into meaningless fragments of browsing, watching, consuming. This is where the real cost of distraction is felt. Not in the abstract, but in moments where preparation collides with opportunity. When the time came to speak, the presentation was still strong, but the razor's edge of clarity was missing. Small hesitations appeared where there should have been fluid precision. The performance was good, but not exceptional. And in high-stakes arenas, good rarely changes the game. The regret afterward was not about the content of the work itself. It was about knowing that those lost hours could have made the difference between a strong impression and an unforgettable one. This dynamic does not exist in isolation. The same forces that strip focus from an entrepreneur preparing for a pitch are at work in artists who lose their creative flow to endless feeds, in students who watch the hours before an exam dissolve into scrolling, in athletes whose training plans are constantly interrupted by impulsive diversions. The pattern is universal, though the stakes vary. The thread tying them together is the quiet surrender of attention to forces designed to capture it. Understanding this is not simply about blaming technology or modern culture. It is about recognizing that attention is the foundation upon which all meaningful work is built. Without the capacity to direct it deliberately and hold it steady, every goal, no matter how ambitious, becomes vulnerable to erosion. This means the battle for focus is not a side issue. It is central to every act of creation, growth, and achievement. The danger lies in underestimating how quickly distraction can become the default mode of existence. It begins innocently enough. Short breaks between work, a quick glance at a screen. But the human brain learns from repetition. Each time attention is surrendered to something trivial, the threshold for distraction lowers. Over time, it becomes more difficult to sustain effort, even for activities that once felt engaging. This is the slow drift toward mental fragility that so many experience without realizing it is happening. What makes the problem even more insidious is that it rarely announces itself. Few wake up one morning and declare they have lost control of their focus. Instead, they adapt to the new baseline without noticing the gradual decline. Projects take longer, ideas lose their sharpness, motivation feels harder to summon. The moments that demand deep engagement become rarer, replaced by a constant state of partial attention. This diluted form of focus feels normal, until it collides with a challenge that demands the full measure of one's capabilities. And yet, the story does not have to end in resignation. The very fact that focus can be lost through conditioning means it can also be rebuilt. But the first step is brutal honesty, a willingness to acknowledge that some of the most time-consuming, energy-draining habits are not accidental, but deliberately reinforced by systems that profit from fragmented attention. It requires admitting that regaining control will not happen by default. It must be fought for, deliberately, in the small moments where the choice is made to resist the pull. The truth is that the capacity to concentrate for long stretches is not a relic of the past. It still exists within every mind, waiting to be reawakened. But it demands a breaking of patterns. A conscious rejection of the instant dopamine hits that masquerade as harmless entertainment. This is the work of replacing reactivity with intention, of retraining the brain to find satisfaction not in the constant novelty of shallow diversions, but in the deep satisfaction of sustained effort. In this way, the struggle for focus becomes more than just a personal challenge. It becomes a statement of ownership over the most valuable resource a human being possesses: the ability to choose what occupies the mind. Every reclaimed moment of attention is a small act of rebellion against the forces that would rather keep it scattered. And in those reclaimed moments lies the possibility of building something lasting, whether it is a business, a work of art, a body of knowledge, or simply a life lived with clarity rather than in fragments. The erosion of focus is rarely a single event. It is an accumulation of countless small moments where the choice between long-term progress and short-term indulgence tips in the wrong direction. Each time the mind is pulled away from a meaningful task, even for seconds, the residue of that break lingers. Returning to the original flow requires more than simply resuming where things left off. It demands rebuilding the mental momentum that was shattered. This recovery process can take minutes, sometimes even longer, meaning that the true cost of distraction is far greater than the time visibly lost. Many underestimate the compounded impact of these interruptions. One harmless-seeming glance at a social feed or quick dive into an online clip can trigger an entire sequence of detours. Before long, an hour has vanished, and the original purpose is reduced to a vague background thought. Multiply this by days, weeks, months, and the total becomes staggering. This is not simply an inconvenience. It is a fundamental derailment of life's trajectory. The grand vision for the future does not collapse in a single moment. It dissolves quietly, piece by piece, under the weight of thousands of minor diversions. One of the most potent forces behind this decline in sustained attention is the engineering of modern digital environments. Platforms, apps, and media outlets are not neutral spaces. They are finely tuned systems designed to hold attention as long as possible. To achieve this, they tap into psychological triggers honed over millions of years of human evolution: novelty, social validation, sexual stimulus, and the thrill of unpredictability. Each scroll, click, and refresh is a gamble for the brain's reward circuitry. And every unpredictable reward strengthens the urge to return. This is the same loop that keeps gamblers at slot machines. Except here, the currency is not coins. It is minutes, hours, and mental clarity. Hypersexualized content holds a particularly powerful place in this ecosystem. It bypasses layers of conscious thought and appeals directly to the most primal wiring. Even for those who do not actively seek it out, exposure has become nearly unavoidable. A single suggestive image embedded in unrelated content can be enough to spark a chain of thoughts and impulses that linger long after the original encounter. Over time, these microbursts of stimulation shift the baseline of what feels engaging. Tasks requiring patience and subtlety begin to feel flat, almost intolerable by comparison. The brain, recalibrated to expect immediate highs, struggles to engage with slower, more demanding pursuits. This shift does not only affect productivity, it alters identity. When daily patterns revolve around chasing small, transient pleasures, long-term aspirations begin to feel abstract and distant. A person may still talk about their goals, still imagine themselves achieving them, but in practice, their energy is repeatedly siphoned away into loops of instant gratification. It is not that ambition disappears, it becomes buried under layers of impulsive detours. The danger in this lies not just in wasted time, but in the gradual erosion of self-trust. Every time a promise is made to focus, just for an hour, just for the afternoon, and that promise is broken in favor of distraction, the mind registers the failure. This repetition builds an internal narrative that focus is fragile, that willpower is unreliable, that meaningful work will always lose against the pull of easy stimulation. This story, reinforced daily, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. People begin to identify as easily distracted, not recognizing that this is not a fixed trait, but the result of repeated conditioning. The consequences of this conditioning are most apparent when opportunity and preparation collide. Consider the weight of a moment that could redefine a career, a relationship, or a personal mission. Weeks of preparation may have gone into this moment, studying, rehearsing, fine-tuning every detail. But if the days leading up to it are riddled with scattered attention, the sharpness needed to execute at the highest level will not be there. It is the mental equivalent of showing up to a championship game after weeks of half-hearted training, not because of a lack of skill, but because focus was continually fractured by habits that felt harmless in the moment. This is why moments of distraction are so much more than fleeting slips. They are rehearsals for failure. Every time focus is broken and surrendered to something trivial, it trains the brain to repeat that behavior under stress. The mind learns to seek escape the moment something feels challenging, uncomfortable, or tedious. This pattern might seem insignificant during casual work, but under pressure, it can be catastrophic. In high-stakes environments, whether it's a negotiation, a performance, a competition, or a life-changing meeting, the margin between success and missed opportunity is razor thin. That margin is often determined not by talent or knowledge alone, but by the ability to remain fully present. The difference between a strong outcome and a life-altering breakthrough can come down to how well the mind resists the urge to wander. The tragic reality is that many people fail in these moments, not because they lack ability, but because they have unknowingly trained themselves to be elsewhere when it matters most. The modern environment makes this training toward distraction almost unavoidable unless resisted deliberately. Unlike in the past, where long stretches of uninterrupted thought were part of daily life, Today's world offers no natural refuge from constant stimulation. Even in quiet spaces, devices whisper for attention. Notifications, recommendations, and updates arrive unbidden, each one a tiny bid for a slice of mental real estate. This relentless intrusion is not a side effect. It is the product of a business model built on capturing and monetizing attention. The more fragmented a person's focus becomes, the more predictable their engagement patterns, and the more profit can be extracted from their behavior. Breaking free from this cycle requires not just discipline, but awareness of the systems at play. It means understanding that the difficulty in concentrating is not a personal failing alone, but a predictable outcome of prolonged exposure to an environment designed to erode it. This awareness is a form of leverage. Once the mechanisms of distraction are recognized, they can be countered. But without this recognition, the pull towards shallow engagement will always feel stronger than the call to do the deep work that builds lasting success. What is perhaps most dangerous is that this erosion of focus often feels normal. People adapt to constant interruption and mistake it for a natural state. They stop remembering what it feels like to be immersed in a task for hours, to lose track of time because of deep engagement rather than shallow consumption. The absence of this experience becomes invisible, and without a clear memory of what has been lost, the urgency to reclaim it fades. Yet, the capacity for deep focus is still there, dormant beneath layers of habit. It is not gone. It is simply buried. Just as the brain can be trained to seek constant stimulation, it can be retrained to tolerate stillness, to embrace tasks that do not deliver instant feedback, to derive satisfaction from effort itself. This retraining is neither quick nor easy. It is, in fact, uncomfortable at first. The same way a muscle unused for years aches when exercised, the mind resists extended concentration after long neglect. But with repetition, the discomfort fades, replaced by a renewed ability to sustain thought over long stretches. And in this regained focus lies an extraordinary power, the ability to make consistent progress toward meaningful goals without being blown off course by every passing distraction. This is the state where preparation meets opportunity at full strength, where the sharpness of thought cuts clean through doubt and hesitation. It is the difference between being merely competent and being exceptional. Reclaiming focus in this way transforms more than productivity. It alters the experience of living itself. Without the constant pull of trivial diversions, time feels fuller, less fragmented. Projects that once felt overwhelming become manageable, not because they have shrunk in scope, but because attention can now hold them without splintering. Conversations deepen, creativity flourishes, and the quiet satisfaction of steady progress replaces the anxious itch for something new. The truth is that a life built on constant distraction will always remain out of alignment with its own potential. Every great achievement, whether in art, science, business, or personal growth, rests on the foundation of sustained attention. Without it, ideas remain half-formed, skills plateau, and ambitions shrink to fit the limits of fractured focus. But with it, the boundaries of what is possible expand dramatically. The challenge, then, is not simply to avoid distraction in the short term, but to build an environment and mindset that makes deep focus the default rather than the exception. This is not about eliminating all sources of pleasure or entertainment. It is about reclaiming the ability to choose when and how they are engaged with, rather than being pulled toward them and unconsciously. It is about living with intention rather than reaction. And that begins with the smallest moments. The choice to resist opening a new tab when the work becomes tedious, the decision to leave a phone out of reach during an important conversation, the pause before clicking a video that promises instant amusement but delivers nothing lasting. Each of these moments is a vote for the kind of mind one wishes to cultivate. Enough of these votes, and the balance shifts. Distraction loses its hold, and attention becomes a tool wielded deliberately rather than something passively surrendered. There is a tendency to treat focus as if it were an unlimited resource, something that can be summoned at will, no matter the circumstances. In reality, attention behaves more like a finite currency, one that depletes with each demand placed upon it. Every interruption, no matter how brief, draws from the same reservoir. And unlike physical energy, which can sometimes be replenished quickly with food or rest, the restoration of deep concentration requires both time and intentionality. When that reservoir is continuously drained by trivial distractions, the capacity to engage in deep work shrinks. What once felt effortless, immersing in a complex problem, writing without pause, planning a long-term strategy, becomes an uphill battle. The mind, accustomed to rapid shifts, resists the stillness required for depth. It craves the next hit of stimulation, and this craving overrides the patience needed for sustained effort. This is one of the quiet tragedies of modern life. A vast number of people have the intellect, creativity, and ambition to achieve remarkable things, yet they operate with fractured attention. They begin each day with plans for meaningful progress, but those plans are gradually eaten away by 1,000 tiny diversions. An alert here, a notification there, a link that leads to another and another. By evening, the tasks that truly mattered remain incomplete, pushed to tomorrow, where the same cycle awaits. The most dangerous distractions are not always the obvious ones. A social feed filled with entertaining videos or an endless scroll of articles is easy to identify as a time sink. But distraction can also disguise itself as productivity. Checking emails, responding to low-priority messages, researching peripheral details, these activities feel like work, yet they often pull focus from the high-value tasks that drive real progress. This is the deceptive comfort of shallow work. It creates the illusion of being busy while avoiding the discomfort of deeper, more demanding engagement. This pattern of shallow engagement becomes self-reinforcing. Each time the brain is allowed to escape from difficulty into ease, it learns that this is an acceptable response to challenge. Over weeks and months, the threshold for discomfort lowers. Tasks that once required only moderate effort begin to feel overwhelming, not because they are inherently harder, but because the capacity to stay with them has atrophied. This is the slow decay of mental stamina, a decline that often goes unnoticed until it collides with a high-pressure moment where endurance is essential. The effect is magnified in environments saturated with hypersexualized imagery and quick-fix entertainment. These forms of content deliver instant, intense rewards with minimal effort. They flood the brain with dopamine, creating a sharp contrast against the slower, subtler rewards of meaningful work. Once this contrast takes hold, ordinary tasks begin to feel bland. The brain, recalibrated to expect constant spikes of stimulation, grows restless without them. It becomes harder to sit with a problem, to write a single page, to plan a strategy without reaching for something to break the quiet. This is not simply a matter of preference. It is a physiological shift. Repeated exposure to high-intensity stimuli changes the way neural pathways fire, strengthening the circuits that seek novelty while weakening those that sustain focus. Over time, the ability to immerse in long-term projects erodes, not because the will to do so has disappeared, but because the brain has been rewired to resist it. When this rewiring intersects with important life opportunities, the consequences are stark. Imagine preparing for a defining moment. A meeting that could secure investment. A performance that could launch a career. A negotiation that could change the trajectory of a business. Everything depends on clarity, presence, and composure. But if the days and weeks leading up to it have been spent in cycles of fragmented attention, the sharpness needed for that moment will be dulled. The preparation may be thorough, but the mental resilience required to deliver it flawlessly will be lacking. Even the smallest lapses in focus during such moments can alter outcomes. A hesitation, a missed detail, a slip in delivery, all can shift the perception of competence. In competitive environments, where others are equally skilled, these small differences often determine who advances and who is forgotten. And the frustration afterward is rarely about the effort that went in. It is about knowing that the ability to perform at full capacity was within reach, but undermined by habits built in quieter, less urgent moments. The most insidious part of this is how normalized it has become. In many circles, the inability to focus for more than a few minutes without checking a device is treated as an unavoidable side effect of modern living. People joke about their short attention spans as if it were a harmless quirk rather than a serious handicap. But there is nothing harmless about a diminished capacity for deep work. It narrows the scope of what can be achieved, and it leaves even the most talented individuals struggling to fully realize their potential. Reversing this trend requires more than temporary detoxes or quick fixes. While short-term challenges, such as staying off social media for a week, can help reveal the extent of the problem, they rarely produce lasting change unless they are a part of a larger shift in mindset and environment. The real transformation comes from creating conditions where focus is not just possible, but natural. This means restructuring both the physical and digital surroundings to minimize the cues that trigger distraction. It means replacing reactive habits with deliberate rituals that prioritize depth over novelty. This process begins with an honest audit of where attention goes each day. Not a vague sense of being distracted, but a precise accounting of how much time is spent in shallow activities versus deep, meaningful work. The numbers often reveal a gap far wider than expected. Seeing this gap in black and white is uncomfortable, but it is also a powerful motivator for change. From there, the work is to steadily rebuild the muscle of concentration. This is not glamorous work. It involves enduring moments of boredom without reaching for a device, staying with a challenging task until the initial discomfort passes, and gradually extending the length of time spent in deep focus. Just as an athlete trains their body through repetition, the mind regains stamina through consistent practice. Each day spent resisting the easy lure of distraction strengthens the ability to sustain effort in the future. Over time, this practice produces tangible shifts. Tasks that once felt draining become easier to start and finish. The constant itch to check for updates fades. Instead of dreading long, uninterrupted stretches of work, they become periods of satisfaction, even enjoyment. And perhaps most importantly, the ability to be fully present in critical moments returns. Presence is not simply the absence of distraction. It is a state of being where the mind, body, and emotions align toward a single objective. It is the opposite of the fractured attention that dominates much of daily life. In this state, decision-making sharpens, creativity flourishes, and performance rises to meet the demands of the moment. This is the state from which breakthroughs are born, the state that transforms potential into reality. The irony is that while the modern world makes this state rarer, it also makes it more valuable. In a landscape where most people are pulled in 100 directions, the individual who can focus deeply for extended periods holds a decisive advantage. They finish projects faster, produce higher quality work, and spot opportunities others miss. They move steadily toward their goals while others drift from one distraction to the next. This advantage is not about working longer hours or possessing more raw talent. It is about mastering the skill of directing attention with intention and holding it steady. In an age where attention is under siege, this skill becomes a form of leverage, amplifying the impact of every other ability. The choice, then, is not whether distraction will exist. It will. The choice is whether to be shaped by it or to shape the conditions under which it operates. Those who take control of their environment, their habits, and their mental conditioning reclaim the ability to decide where their focus goes. And in doing so, they reclaim the power to shape their own outcomes. The quiet truth is that the world will never stop offering reasons to look away from what matters. The stream of novelty will not run dry. The devices will not stop buzzing. The images designed to hook the mind will not disappear. These things are woven into the structure of daily life, embedded in both public spaces and private moments. Waiting for the environment to become less distracting is a losing strategy. The change must come from within, from a deliberate decision to stop being a passive participant in the war for attention. Taking control begins with understanding that focus is not simply about what is excluded. It is equally about what is embraced. It is not enough to push away distractions. There must be something of greater gravity pulling the mind forward. When a goal is deeply compelling, when the stakes are clear and personal, resisting the pull of shallow pleasures becomes easier. This is why the clearest path to sustained attention is to align daily actions with something that carries genuine weight. A vague desire to be productive will always lose against the instant hit of entertainment. A mission that feels urgent, personal, and worth protecting stands a better chance. But even the strongest sense of purpose can be undermined if the mental environment is left vulnerable. The brain is not a fortress. It is porous, and every gap in its defenses is an opening for distraction. This is why the most focused individuals build routines and systems that protect their attention. They create workspaces where temptations are physically absent. They establish fixed blocks of uninterrupted time. They treat their energy as a resource to be spent deliberately, rather than scattered across dozens of trivial tasks. These choices may seem small in isolation, but together they create an ecosystem where deep work can thrive. The key is recognizing that these systems are not about restriction. They are about liberation. They free the mind from the constant burden of self-control by removing as many points of friction as possible. Without constant exposure to triggers, the urge to indulge them weakens. Without a phone buzzing on the desk, there is no fight to resist picking it up. Without access to distracting sites during work hours, there is no decision to be made about whether to check them just for a minute. The fewer temptations present, the more energy remains for the work that matters. Rebuilding focus is a process measured not in days, but in months and years. Just as the habits that eroded attention formed gradually, the habits that restore it must be reinforced over time. There will be moments of relapse, times when the lure of quick entertainment wins out, when the mind seeks escape rather than depth. But these moments do not define the journey unless they become the rule rather than the exception. What matters is returning to the path again and again until the act of focusing deeply feels natural once more. The transformation begins to show itself subtly at first. Projects that once dragged for weeks are completed in days. The fog that once hovered over important decisions clears. The restless itch for stimulation quiets, replaced by a calm readiness to work. Perhaps most importantly, confidence returns. Not the shallow confidence that comes from temporary bursts of motivation, but the steady confidence that comes from keeping promises to oneself. Each day of sustained focus strengthens this trust, creating a feedback loop where success fuels further discipline. When this state becomes the norm, something remarkable happens. Opportunities that once seemed out of reach begin to feel attainable. This is not because the world has become easier, but because the internal capacity to meet its demands has grown. The investor meeting, the performance, the presentation. These moments no longer feel like high-stakes gambles, but like natural extensions of a well-practiced skill. The sharpness, composure, and presence needed to excel are not summoned out of nowhere. They are the product of hundreds of hours of disciplined attention built day by day. In this way, focus becomes a kind of quiet power. It does not shout for recognition, yet it leaves a trail of results that speak louder than any declaration. Those who master it do not need to rush, because their work compounds. They do not need to constantly chase new opportunities, because the quality of their execution draws them in. They are not at the mercy of the digital tide, because their minds have learned to stand firm against it. This power is available to anyone willing to claim it, but it will not be handed over freely. It must be earned through the repeated choice to resist the easy, the instant, and the shallow. It must be protected as fiercely as any other valuable asset, because it can be lost more quickly than it is gained. And in a world that profits from distraction, the choice to protect it is an act of quiet defiance. Ultimately, the question comes back to what kind of life is worth living? A life pulled in fragments, where the most vivid moments happen on a glowing screen and the days blur into an endless loop of scrolling? Or a life where attention is directed with precision, where the goals are pursued with the full force of one's abilities, where the mind is present for the moments that matter most? The difference between the two is not talent, luck, or circumstance. It is the quality of focus. Focus shapes not only what is accomplished, but who a person becomes in the process. The act of resisting distraction strengthens discipline, patience, and self-awareness. The act of committing fully to a task builds resilience and trust in one's own abilities. Over time, these qualities extend beyond work, influencing relationships, health, and overall well-being. A mind trained to be present in one area of life becomes more present in all of them. There will always be temptations to drift, and there will always be justifications for giving in. The digital world will always promise something easier, faster, more immediately satisfying. But the rewards of deep focus are of a different order entirely. They are not fleeting. They accumulate. They transform. And once they begin to compound, they create a life where opportunities are met with readiness, where work is not something to escape from, and where the passing of time feels like progress rather than loss. In the end, regaining control of attention is not about rejecting the modern world. It is about learning to navigate it without being consumed by it. It is about understanding that while distraction is abundant, so too is the potential for clarity if one is willing to claim it. And for those who do, the payoff is immense. The ability to build something lasting in a world built on the fleeting.